Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cedar Culture Podcast. I'm Eric, this is Gary. Today we're going to be smoking an Archetype Sage Advice by Ventura Cigar Company while we talk a little bit about politics. We'll be right back.
Let's bundle these leaves and burn them and suck on them.
Welcome back. Like Eric said, we are smoking the Archetype Sage Advice by Ventura Cigars today. Really excited. Both of us have had this stick before, but really excited to smoke it again. This is a collaboration between Ventura and Davidoff, so very high-end company collaboration. And this stick, we're both smoking the Toro, which is a 6x52. It is inspired by the work of Carl Jung, which is kind of cool because I'm a school psychologist, so kind of has that tie-in. And
that's why you're doing the opening, because you know how to say the name.
Jung. The J is a Y. And mythographer Joseph Campbell. And I guess the reason it's called Archetype is they said that that's kind of like the repeating characters who occur in dreams. I'm reading from my notes. Of all people and myths of all cultures. Kind of leading to like the hero's journey. Like the hero in a story, the rise and the fall. So that's kind of the background of this stick. And again, really excited to smoke it. What's your first feel of the stick?
It's right up my alley. On the darker side, not quite a Maduro. I do like Maduros, but I do like anything that's on the darker side. A little veiny, not super toothy though. Like otherwise smooth outside of the veins.
Which I guess is kind of odd. You'd see for the vein, you'd really feel like it's more of that like toothy, gritty wrapper.
Sometimes
it's smooth,
sometimes
oily.
yes.
I get like
sometimes no. Yeah,
oil.
Yeah, definitely a little oily too, which is definitely right up my alley as well.
I think that's
Toro size
scent too.
To me, the Toro size just like is a cigar size. Like that's the size of cigar I like to smoke. But
52 gauge is nice. Like we said the other episode, 60 is a lot of work to hold in there.
For me.
Yeah. While you're cutting, I'll kind of talk about, we kind of thought it was interesting as we were doing some research on this stick. The wrapper is an NSA and Habano hybrid. The origin is Dominican Republic. It has a Dominican San Vicente binder. And their filler, hint, hint, is an undisclosed multi-tobacco.
Everything's limited release, short supply, unknown these days. Jesus.
We were joking about like how can everything be a limited release and so rare if I can walk into a cigar shop and literally buy one. But regardless, it sells sticks definitely. I like your lighters, buddy. Impressive.
That was good. That one I just got for free from the shop I just started going to.
Free's good.
Non-deadbeat tobacconist. My old shop was kind of a deadbeat. Didn't really know what he was doing. I found out later that he had bought a shop that I don't even think he smoked cigars himself. I just kind of bought a shop from somebody.
Tough to, like,
but the other shop that I just found, though, it is. That's why I didn't know that my father's cigars was not made by his dad, because he didn't even know how to explain cigars. But the new one I found, though, right around the corner, it's actually closer, and this guy's been open for 30 years. I was talking to him the other day. He's one of the first shops in the area, and he had a newsstand. He was telling me the story. He had a newsstand, and decided he really liked cigars, so he decided to put a cigar lounge in the back, and everybody thought he was crazy. He said, according to him, everybody thought he was crazy, but awesome. It worked, and 30 years later, he's still here, and has some really cool sticks.
Don't most success stories talk about everybody thought they were crazy until people were like, everyone asks why you're doing it, and then you succeed and like, well, how did you do that? Well, I told you along the way everything, and you told me I was nuts,
Right. Whether it's always, in the story, everybody told him he was crazy, so we'll go with it. So this one's interesting, right? Because we've both had it before, and the first time we ever had this cigar, we were together, and kind of like I'm feeling right now, in the first 3, 4, 5 puffs, we were both super underwhelmed. Right. And I'm still, that's holding true for me right now.
It's pepper, but it's not flavor yet, and I don't think it was until that first third really opened up. I think at the same time, we were both kind of like, wait a second, this is starting to get really tasty.
Well, yeah, that's where I was going to go, which is, the first few puffs, we hated it. The first time we had it, it was just not good.
Yeah.
But then as we were chit-chatting, several puffs later, I forget, either you or I, one of us perked up and was like, "Hey, do you like this now?" And I think you said it, and I was like, "Actually, I love this now."
Yeah.
And it's become like a staple of our rotation. Willing to suffer through the first 4, 5, 6 puffs to get into the rest of the stick. That is fantastic.
You know what's really interesting? Like I had the Davidoff late hour for the first time yesterday.
Yeah, and I had
And
it for the first time like last week.
I'm getting similar notes, not the same stick,
Okay.
but I'm getting similar notes. You know, I'm definitely not a high end cigar smoker. I'm just kind of entering that world. But my first Davidoff was a late hour Winston Churchill, which is another darker cigar, but similar notes, not the same flavor. So some of the cigar smokers might know what I'm saying. Not the same profile, but picking up some notes of the same stick.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
There you go.
What kind of notes?
You know, the pepper was real strong on those first, I would say 5 to 6 initial puffs, like getting that first third developed. Now kind of mellowing out, and again, some leather, some chocolate. That oily, I mean, it's putting off smoke, which you know,
It's not no Liga though. It's not.
No,
it's not. I don't know. You
Well,
think
on the
it's putting off a little smoke. I don't think it's putting off a ton of smoke.
I guess like after the draw, like I'm impressed with how it like continues to kind of stay smoky, as I've heard some people
Agree
say.
to disagree. I'm like trying to find the smoke. But anyway, yeah, no, I would agree with you. It's funny, you use the word leather a lot when you describe cigars. I don't use that word that often, but that I think that is appropriate for this.
Right.
I found my leather stick for sure.
And I'd never used it before the other day either. Like I said, I've always kind of felt it, but I think it runs parallel with that tobacco flavor, the oily, the leather. You know, I think it's that natural product smell. I had my wife smell a cigar today that I got, and she was like, "I don't want to like sound."
Did you give her the stinky cigar?
Not yet. But she's like, "It smells like a pet store, like hamster chips, those like cedar chips." She's like, "You know, when you walk into a pet store." So I kind of like. Once
I don't have a pet, so.
But a pet store, like.
Yeah, it's been a while.
You know what? When I hear people say the scent of cigars, I hear hay a lot. I hear grass. I hear like the.
People gotta start describing cigars with words that sound appetizing. It's when people say they're like, "Oh, this tastes like shit. Try it." It's like, "Oh, this cigar is so good. You gotta have it. It tastes like dog shit and manure." Like.
The wine,
weeds, grass.
The wine documentary that I was telling you about, they talk about there's like a hidden psalm. There's a hidden word that they use that they say Riesling. I believe Riesling grape. They call it. Oh man, what's the fruit? Currant or something like that, or whatever they say, and it smells like cat urine. But they said it's like that pungent.
Oh, that's it's like a euphemism they use.
Right.
They don't want to insult.
Well, because they don't want to say, "Oh, what does this taste like?" And people are like, "Oh, cat piss." Because you're not going to spend $30.
Well, it's actually funny. This naturally dovetailed a little bit, but I don't follow politics a lot. That happens to be the topic today. But it's funny because I remember my first real lesson in euphemisms. A guy while I was in the Marine Corps was super into politics, and he was teaching me how, like, when the Senate meets or whatever, and they want to insult each other, but you can't, on the Senate floor, you can't be like, "Hey, douchebag."
Right.
So they would be like, the more almost compliments they give, and I don't know if any of this is true, but it's like, "My esteemed colleague, Senator so-and-so," that's like saying like, "That asshole, Senator so-and-so." Right.
But they have to save face. And
yeah, and then if they're like whatever, the utmost supreme esteemed colleague, then I guess that's like, they're a huge douchebag. But so over into politics. So a little bit different. Look, like we always say in every episode, we're not an expert about anything. We're just two average schmucks that like to smoke cigars, and
we would be doing this anyway.
Pontificate.
We would be doing this anyway without a camera and a microphone.
Pretty much. So, but we wanted to talk about politics because I think the reason was, and you had brought it up, Gary, was just that most people, we think, a lot of people are probably somewhat like us when it comes to politics. You call yourself middle of the road or kind of in between, and there's a stigma to that sometimes. Sometimes people will say, or the stereotype is, well, if you're middle of the road, like you're wishy-washy. You're not picking a side. And I think it's a lot more complicated than that. In fact, I'm being a little self-serving here because I definitely consider myself a moderate in the middle, but I think it's the opposite. I think that when you're in the middle, you're actually, of course, sometimes it could be because you're wishy-washy, but I think sometimes it's because you're really putting a lot of thought into this. You're not just voting your party.
Right.
And the idea of voting a party has always been really lost on me. I'm a registered Republican. I've voted in 3 elections, and I've voted in no particular order, independent, Republican, and Democrat. So I've literally
So that's about as middle of the road as
about as middle of the road as you can be. I was raised in a more conservative household, but raised in the Northeast, so not ultra conservative. Then went into the Marine Corps, where you're getting very more conservative. That's where I learned what country music was and all that stuff. And then when I got out, I went to Rutgers University satellite campus for college in Camden, New Jersey, one of the most dangerous cities in the country for however many years. And so to have that kind of wide range of experience is why I feel qualified to say I'm a moderate for good reason, and just kind of put a lot of thought into each election. It's tough.
And hearing your story, hearing your background, like we've been friends for almost a decade, but hearing you kind of bullet point the things in your life that led to those viewpoints, it makes a lot more sense. Like I appreciate the fact that you're middle of the road in that regard, because all those puzzle pieces come together to form that. I was thinking about how much this conversation kind of parallels one of the first episode where we talked about how cigars can be overwhelming because you know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to know exactly what you're talking about. And I remember even saying that to you before we hit record. Like, I don't consider myself a guy who follows politics, but I consider a guy that like cares and loves about my family deeply, loves my community deeply. Like, my son and I went to the post office to actually deliver some cigars to a friend. And we helped an elderly gentleman with a large package to the door. Like, I want to teach my son that it's about caring for your neighbor. Like, I don't care what political agenda that is. I think being a good person, no matter religion, politics, all those taboo subjects, like, I want them to be good people. Not because the party says so, not because religion says so, because it's the right thing to do. And 100%. If we can take care of that, I think a lot of other things, you take care of the big things, the little things kind of take care of themselves.
100%, Garrett. And going back to what I was saying before, I mentioned going to Rutgers and Camden. I mean, we all have these experiences in life, and I was talking about how high-level experiences in life had sort of formed some opinions. But I remember when I was at school going to a summer class, and in summer classes, short semester, it's like 3-hour-long classes. There's a woman in there, brought her baby, and then all of a sudden one time I turn around in class and she's breastfeeding the baby, and I was pretty young, I'm in my 20s, and that can go kind of one or two ways, right? Like that can really drive you in one direction to kind of hate on that, or to drive you in another direction, which fortunately, I really appreciated. Like, oh my God, like that's somebody that's not letting excuses stand in their way. Despite what some people might say.
And that goes back to the affiliation of the party. Like, don't let that define you. Like, let Eric make a decision. Make Gary make a decision.
And I think it's okay. And that's where I really fumble with this whole 2-party system concept, because, the idea that of what are there now 30 major issues in the world, right? Like, there's so many issues that are like highly debated, that like really matter for good reason. How are we supposed to divide ourselves among 30 issues into one of 2 parties? That's all you get.
And are they going to perfectly align with everything?
Of course not. But then all of a sudden, you'll have some people maybe on one side of the aisle, casting hate towards people on the other side of the aisle. How can you feel this way about that issue?
Right.
Well, maybe they don't feel that way about that issue. Their party might, but they might be on the party because of the other 10 issues that they'll align with the party with. And I just think it's too difficult. That's why I think it's okay to be a moderate. I think sometimes people get shamed for being moderates. Again, going back to like just being wishy-washy or whatever. I think there's great reason to be kind of in the middle. I think there's great reason to not make a decision on who you want to vote for president. And, until you listen to the debates, I don't think you have to make your decision ahead of time. But there's going to be so much more to talk about with all that. I don't want to steal too much from the second, third. Anything else that you want to kind of get in?
No, just that, like, we keep talking about party, and that's where that expression, the party line, is. Like, give them the party line. Well, the party line is just I'm saying this because I'm supposed to. I feel this way because I'm told I'm supposed
Right.
to, and it's just an artificial like viewpoint. I think if anything that the coronavirus and spending more time at home has kind of brought us back to like other people are important and our communities are important. So if anything, as we wrap up the first third here, I think me not having a firm grasp and understanding of the political system, I think it makes me realize I have to focus more on local government. I think it's important to know what my school board feels, how our local school board, how our local town, the governor, because like I always joke with you and I say, I don't know that these two candidates have my best interest. Like we're not a blip on their radar.
That's a
we
good
don't,
point.
we don't make
with,
enough.
With local politics, we often, most of us, I think, ignore local politics and focus on national politics. But
who's
in a lot
the
of
driving
ways,
force in our life?
What's more relevant in your day-to-day life? So
Exactly.
we'll step away here and come back for the second third, where I want to throw another topic at you that I think is really relevant. You actually started to touch on it. You started asking about like dating and relationships and things like that.
Yes.
What I want to talk about in the second third is just the idea of or kind of ask you and share some of my own experiences around especially this election cycle, if politics really caused any divisions in your life, like real unfortunate divisions. As politics get hotter and hotter now, I know it's causing divisions for a lot of people. I've got some stories. So let's come back and talk about it in the second third.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're in the second third now. But while we took a break, we did realize that we didn't really give the first third a ton of justice. Kind of talked about the light, jumped into the first topic and started running on the first topic and didn't really go into that first third too much. So
sometimes that's how conversations go.
What do you got, Gare?
A lot of straight tobacco flavor as the first third kind of finishes up. Still some hints of that white pepper, some light pepper notes in there. But just a straightforward tobacco. And if memory serves correctly, there'll be some flavors kind of coming out in that second third. So I'm excited to get there. Yeah,
no, I agree. I mean, this is a pretty mild stick, maybe like a little bit of white pepper for me. Like it's generally a pretty mild stick. And it's not to downplay it. It's smooth. It's beautiful. It burns razor sharp. It's
still oily.
Flavorful. It's still oily, but it's not, it doesn't jump with like crazy pepper for me. Like I'm still on that leather. I think you were saying like just straight tobacco, kind of just.
And it's a good tobacco.
It's a good tobacco. It's not
flavor.
Everything I'm saying sort of sounds like it's downplaying it, but it's one of my favorite sticks right now. So I don't want to downplay it too much, but So, in that first third, we were talking a bit about, I started going into like kind of bipartisanship a little bit. I know we wandered a little bit all over the place, but generally kind of talking about how it's okay to be, kind of in the middle and a little undecided and a little measured when you make a decision coming into the election, or hell, when this releases, I don't know, the election might have happened already. But anyway, It's okay if it took you a while to decide.
We knew.
But you'd asked a little bit about relationships and like dating, more about dating. But I wanted to talk actually just about relationships in life. For me, I know I have some people that are really important to me in my life that are very far on the left side of the aisle, and then I've got some other people that are very important to me and are very on the right, like the other side of the aisle. And
agreed. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
I think so. I mean, I imagine so. I hope so. Well, I don't hope so, because it's rough. I'll give you an example. I was at one time I was sitting there and eating dinner, maybe like 8 p.m. on a weekend, and within about 8 p.m. on a Sunday, and I'm eating dinner on my couch, watching TV, kind of getting ready for that work week, and within probably, I don't know, 20-minute span, I'd gotten text messages from two individuals on opposite sides, extreme opposite sides, just with some tidbit, some factoid about their candidate or against the other candidate. I don't remember, but I'm like sitting there and I'm like, man, the people that are close to me that are really far to the left, they think I'm a crazy Republican, and the people that I'm really close with that are really far to the right, they think I'm a crazy liberal. And it's unsettling for me. It's actually it's quite difficult. And the part that's just a nuisance, right? Like that's just frustrating. It's people coming to both sides. You're trying to relax. Sunday 8 p.m. You're just trying to relax. You have people coming out with their opinions. But I'll tell you where it's really hard, and why I say like I hope a lot of people aren't in this position, even though I feel like they are, is that I feel like I have people in my life that can't let me because of it, that are so far on either side that they actually think people on the other side are bad people.
And isn't that funny that
by nature.
You're like the glue between those two individuals?
It's not easy being the glue.
No. And I would agree. Like there's I talk to, coworkers daily, and I try not to let it be known, really, because I'm not sure where I sit. Like I said, kind of in the first third of the stick, like I'm so focused just on like family, community, schools, my kids' local teams, where like the global, it's so wide. That net is so wide where it's hard. Like you said, I don't know that I could say, well, these 30 points I absolutely agree with, and these 30 points I really disagree with. Like it's
right.
I don't have a clear delineation.
Do you have anything like that in your life where
for the relationships? I mean, I could say, I think, as what's that old expression? The position you take depends on the seat that you sit in. So like if you're a common worker, I think you kind of fall into one, but if you're business owner, I think you kind of fall into another. So I think as our parents age, as our friend group kind of ages too, like as we're entering our late 30s, early 40s, things change. People's wealth changes, people's businesses change, relationships change. So I don't know that I have enough conversation where I would be afraid for people to kind of meet. But I know like my good friends, like.
But that's the thing. That's kind of my point. Maybe I am unique. Maybe it's not that common. I don't seek those. I don't have. In fact, I avoid those conversations.
Right.
But it's like that's where it's. What I'm talking about is so extreme that I'm sitting at home on the couch at 8 p.m. on a Sunday watching TV.
That I can totally identify.
And get unsolicited from both sides. So extreme.
And I feel like, remember, we started this conversation with what are those taboo conversations? Religion. Politics,
no, but that's what I'm asking. Has that happened to you? Like, do you have a scenario like mine or no? Because maybe you're saying like it's common. Maybe it's not common.
Maybe it's not common, but I think because of the political climate, because of obviously things are so televised and you see, I guess. So my
no is okay.
No. Yeah,
it's okay to say no.
My short answer is no. But what I was going to lead into is that it's being talked about so freely and so openly. Like
I'm surprised that you don't have it.
I feel this way, and I'm assuming you do too. I feel like those are the conversations I hear more. Like this is the position I agree with. Don't you feel that way? And you're kind of like, yes and no. Like I said, I have coworkers and completely ends of the spectrum.
Well, this makes sense though, if you think about it. So I was talking in the first third about some of my experiences, right? Like, I grew up in a household that thinks, one way. We all learn from our parents. And then I did not go to college right after. I went to the military. And so that's very different.
Yes.
And you went to college, like right out of high school. And then right out of college, you went back into the education system. Whereas for me, going to the Marines, then going to college, it's like two very different worlds.
You have this
diverse. I wonder if that's part of it. Like you've lived your life in a certain lane.
Yeah.
And so maybe, all I was going to say is be thankful in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm grateful for like my varied experiences, and I'm grateful to have been exposed to all that. It makes me, I think, a more well-rounded person. However, I think I've known this, and through talking to this, is making me realize, while it makes me more, I think, well-rounded and open to different ideas, makes me tortured. Like, being stuck in the middle. And
you and I have always talked about we were people that never really identified with like a clique or a group. Like even through high school, college, I had friends with athletes. I had friends with non-athletes, and
the jocks wouldn't have me. The nerds wouldn't have me. Nobody won't. The girls wouldn't have me.
We have you. The Cedar culture.
Gary's had me.
But so I feel for you in that regard. But I try to just.
Well, it's not a poor me. I'm just. It's interesting talking about it though, because I really, I thought it was a little crazy, like how extremes I had on the sides of me. But I also thought maybe a lot of people. But talking through it now, it makes sense. Most people have somewhat linear lives.
Yeah. But I'm also open to those conversations. Like just because someone is on an opposing view of mine, I still like to hear them out because they're someone I respect. I respect them either as a coworker, a parent, a coach, whatever the situation is. Right now, I mean, the only people I see my neighbors. I see the people that interact with my job, my kids' circle because they're young, they're teachers, they're coaches, you and some of my good friends. So again, it goes back to like my close circles. I need to find out what's happening in my community, my local government, before I can even start to worry about how that will impact, the global sense of it all. But again, it goes back to it being very overwhelming. It's an overwhelming thing.
How did you feel, kind of being somewhat undecided? I'm not going to ask you like who you thought won the debates or anything like that, but I don't know. Just how did the first debate, the presidential debate, how did that make you feel?
I think it really led to my initial thought to my wife was, this is the best we got. Like, we have, how many millions of people, how many. Did
you see that South Park episode,
no,
10, 15 years ago or whatever?
Oh, that, yes.
It's super relevant, the shit sandwich or the douchebag.
Yes, exactly. But did you also hear on HBO there was another South Park?
They just did a special now. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
But they always, they do really topical, they hit you in the face with what the culture is, and it's what it is.
Well, and they're so timely that you can get your news from it.
Right. We were just joking, I get it from SNL. I hear the Weekend Update. I'm like, it's the fake news, but it's the news. And a lot of the stuff's funny enough to be once I saw that first debate, I was like, SNL's gonna have a field day.
I know.
And now with the vice presidential debate with the fly, that's even gonna be bigger. People are already talking about 100%. Halloween costumes.
Cold open on SNL this week. It's gonna be a fly. I guess by the time we publish this, we'll know if we're right or not. But
it's true.
But
you heard it here though.
It's bad though. It's going back to the last presidential election, when Trump was running, I remember saying to some friends, I was like, well, we're gonna have a good SNL season, and this was just when Trump was running. I'm like, oh, we're gonna have a good SNL season, and in hindsight, just kind of looking, just again taking sides out of it, but just looking at where we are today in 2020 at this point in time, I almost feel a little guilty. Yeah. Kind of relishing in we're gonna have a good SNL. It's I don't know that's it might be worth trading a season of SNL right now for a little consistency in our politics.
But it really highlights that I like asking questions. I like talking to different people. Kind of going off topic but subtopic a little bit. I remember being in high school and being this is who I am. This is the music I listen to. This is the friends that I have. And then that was my teens, early 20s. And then in my mid-20s, I started to say, hey, I really like this person. So, when I met you, hey, what music do you listen to? What books do you read? Because I enjoy this I enjoy this person. So let me see what they're taking in. And it opens you up to so many different things. So another thing I hope this does is open perspectives for people to be yeah, we may disagree, but why do you feel that way? Why is that important to you and you feel this?
I know, I would love
it's a scary conversation.
It is a really scary conversation, especially right now. Again, going back to where it feels like if you have an opinion or I guess have picked kind of a side, a party, then people are going to automatically assume you feel a certain way about dozens of issues. And that sucks. Because then what happens is, well, if you vote for this candidate, you're definitely a racist. Or if you vote for this candidate, you want free everything for everybody, you're a crazy socialist.
We're handing the country over to somebody else.
We're Europe now, and it's tough.
And that goes back to what you said, the bipartisan. Why? I don't know. It's so hard. It's again, not understanding politics. Sometimes I see a bill introduced, and it's well, we want to make sure that the elderly are taken care of, but then it's attached to this other weird thing, and you're how do those things, where's the relation? Can't we take care of...
Well, there's not. That's not even...
Right.
There's not a relation. We know there's not a relation. But that is part of the flaw of just the that's something different. That's getting into, who's bought and sold by whom and what do they promise. But anyway, we've probably hit this topic enough, but just the idea of... If anybody's watching or listening and is kind of can relate to the situation I'm in, I feel you. It's tough, kind of being on an island in the middle.
But, drop us a comment on how you can relate to that. I think that would be interesting to see and to show Eric that he's not alone.
All right, well, we'll finish up this second third off screen, and we'll come back and hit the last third and wrap up the topic too.
Excellent.
All right, we had to rush back in here for the last third. We got a little carried away talking off screen. Notice our labels were about to start burning, so we figured we'd come on back in and talk about this last third. Gary, what are you getting as you're coming into this last third?
Yeah, the second third I was hoping for, and it happened. I got a lot of those dried fruit notes, got a lot of those oils and caramelizing flavors and sugars from the wrapper. So really enjoyed how the second third finished up, and excited to see, because usually that final third gets a little stronger and gets a little intense. So I'm excited to see how that opens up as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm, again, most of the same there. Those dry fruits, it's sort of caramelizing a bit, getting a little sweeter, a little bolder, a little sweeter, a little more depth of flavor. And it really reminds me actually of why we love this stick so much, because, even in those first few puffs, as I was talking about how we always kind of don't enjoy the first few puffs of this cigar. It's kind of weird, but was talking about how we love it, but at that moment while I was saying that, I'm like, wait, why do we love it though? I can't really remember. And really, this is a stick that delivers more and more as you go. Like I never really thought about it. Yeah, I never really thought about it, but we always talked about how those first few puffs are a little rough, and we've talked a little bit how we love it at the end, but I never really put as much thought into it as we are, for this episode, that it really is like a cascade kind of journey through the cigar as it evolves. And I wonder if that's on purpose, because that's their whole line. Yeah. That Archetype line is about the journey, right? They talk about it's the journey of student to master, where it's
sage advice to this.
All the way through, like I forget what the last stick's called, but like kind of like the student becomes the master is the thing, is the concept. And maybe they did each individual cigar like that too. Maybe each one is meant to be a journey. I didn't read that anywhere, but I'm going to stick to it.
And this, I always like when they do cool stuff on bands. I'm a nerd and I collect all my bands anyway, but this one has a quote by Carl Jung. It says, "It all depends on how we look at things and not how they are in themselves." So it's kind of.
That reminds, that's so funny. Is mine the same, or is it different?
They're all the same on this line, I think.
Yeah. But it's funny because it depends on how we look at things. It reminds me of my favorite teacher. I had him for 2 years in high school for chemistry and physics, Mr. Nell. Did you have him for anything?
I did not.
He was this total hippie, kind of like the Beavis and Butthead teacher, but like not to that extent. But he was a singer in a band and had ponytail down to his booty crack and stuff. And he would always say, because it came up in physics, and he would talk about it's all relative. Yeah. The theory of relativity, whatever. And it's just it's all relative, man. And he would apply that, and I've carried that with me so much in life. Like, it all depends on the angle you look at things from. A lot of times we'll look at people and say how are you complaining about this? Like, you have all that money. How are you complaining about that? Yeah. Well, look, even Paris Hilton has had a bad day. Like, her bad day might be she stubbed a toe, and that's the worst thing that's ever happened to her. But relative to her life, that's probably a really, really, really bad day. Yeah. And for us, we stub our toe on the way to the other 10 things that are going to go wrong today.
For that hour.
But anyway, we digress. So, kind of wrapping up here as we're wrapping up this stick, that journey of the stick is the journey of our topic. And so we talked a bit about bipartisanship and how it's okay, but how it can be really difficult. It's okay to be well-rounded, and it's okay to kind of be undecided and be really measured in your decision. But there's a downside. We talked a little bit about the downside. What are you thinking?
I was thinking how that ties into the quote. I think your position speaks right to that quote, and how it's relative, that you don't have to be. That's some sage
advice right there. Any final thoughts on the stick?
The stick still holds up. I do think it's going to be heavy in my rotation. Again, a stick I probably would have walked past in a cigar shop. So
I don't know. Would you though? Those boxes are cool, dude.
The box is cool, and
the fact that so the one brick and mortar that I go to, they have, I forget how many sticks are in this line. I want to say it's about 7 or so. Yeah. And they had 4 of them, and so the box designs are all the same but different colors. Mm-hmm. Everything. The foot band is pretty much the same on all of them, but a different color. The regular band is slightly different, but slightly similar. I don't know. I think they all look cool next to each other.
Maybe I wouldn't walk past it, but having the psychology background that I do, I wish there was.
Yeah, how would you not be all over that?
But I wouldn't have known that it had any affiliation.
That's true.
So
yeah, it's not super obvious.
And real quick before I forget, because it's something I wrote in my notes. When George Washington left office, he gave his goodbye speech. He even said his exit speech where having political parties is going to get in the way of what politics' true purpose is.
Did he really?
Yeah, and I thought that, or I don't know.
How did you not bring that up when we're talking literally about the two-party system in the middle?
I think because by the time we were getting in there, it was like at the bottom of the paper, so I forgot that I had it in there. But I definitely wanted to get that in because I thought
George Washington was the guiding light for a lot of this episode, and we didn't even know it till now. But all right, man. Well, this has been fun. We've never talked about politics together, so we got to learn a little bit about each other. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, some people watching learned a little bit about us and just the way we like to think. Hopefully, some of you can relate, and if so, let us know in the comments. Or if you're listening on a podcast platform, hit us up on social media. Hit us up on social media anyway. Give us a follow, Cedar Culture on Instagram. And as always, long ashes.
Stay smoky, friends.
Thanks for checking out the Cedar Culture Podcast. If you'd like that episode, go ahead, tap, like, follow, subscribe, whatever it is on your platform of choice. And if you are on YouTube, hit that bell as well to be notified of new episodes. It really helps us out. We appreciate it.
And then don't forget to head over to Instagram and Facebook and follow us as well.
Do it.
Do it.